the mad dash to make sure everything works at the beginning. And then a few minutes of just checking to make sure stuff's working. All right, let me check the stream real quick. See if it's working.
I am viewing the stream, and there's me and 42 other people, Kyle.
Oh, wow. Well, I better...
So it looks like you did it.
I better do something.
Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, March 9th, and we are doing a little art presentation here. Kyle is going to be...
There we go.
Never leave. Kyle's going to be doing some illustrating for y'all, and
there we go.
Be providing moral support as usual, and chatting with people. This is Patrick Leader, owner of Leader Games, and this is Kyle Ferrin, illustrator for Leader Games. And man, that is a impeccable beard you have today, sir.
Thank you. I haven't worn a mask yet because I've just been home and in a car.
Sure.
So I have this thing where it's like when I do my beard in the morning, I pull my mustache out. But then I wear a mask and it goes. So by the end of the day, I look like a hamster or something. But so thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. We're just going to draw stuff. If you haven't seen the link in the Kickstarter update, you should check it out. We have some coloring pages from all sorts of Leader Games properties prepared for you if you just want to color. But mostly just we're going to hang out and chat and talk. And I'm going to hang out with Patrick. And he's going to field questions to me if I don't catch them in the chat. Otherwise, we can just check over there. I think we might have 1 or 2 questions from Twitter earlier if we want to get the ball rolling.
Oh, yeah, I can run and get those.
And then, yeah, we'll start from
Lord
there.
of the Board asks, do you also participate in design of the factions / boards? And sorry if I talk too fast. I am super over caffeinated and I'm a bit sugared right now. It was a tough day getting up, so board. All right, so do you also participate in design of the factions boards through the artwork that you do? Like, have changes come about in designs based on your artwork?
I don't know. Maybe you can answer that question, Patrick. Have I ever done something that you thought, well, now we have to do that?
Yeah, I feel like that is very true. I feel like you have, I'm trying to think of specific examples, but I feel like you have been close enough to design that, like, when you do something like, well, I guess we're integrating that now.
Well, the one example I can think of offhand that I know for sure is true, because some stuff has probably happened that I just don't know about, but the one I know for sure is true is the one time at PAX Unplugged where I drew a possum with arrows sticking out of its back, and later it became a vagabond. And I'm
the best vagabond. Yeah, the Shadow Paladin. Well, so the Shadow Paladin is interesting because I think you drew the Shadow Paladin. I was talking about making an anti-paladin at one point, and then as a hero, right? Because the original Shadow Paladin was yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And then we decided it was too weird thematically to have a negative character in that hero slot and pass. So we turned the Shadow Paladin into a monster, which is a much easier design, frankly. There's a thing in my notes called the 7 Knights, and it's the back when Kyle and I were in Crystal Caverns, I designed 7 variants of the knight, and basically any work I've done in Vast since then is just one of those knights being brought up. And so that was back then. There was going to be an anti-paladin knight or undead knight or whatever you want to call it, and in that document, and that was one of those variants. And then we ended up just making Shadow Paladin a monster.
Yeah. So kind of, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of this funny thing at work where we'll kind of be spitballing stuff in Slack, and if I think something sounds cool, and even if we're just kind of half joking about it, I can sort of push that idea along by just drawing it and being like, hey, just for fun, I thought I would actually draw this, and everyone's like, oh, well, now we have to do it, or like, now we have the art asset already. So and maybe I shouldn't say that in front of Patrick, but that's how I push my prerogatives into the into the workflow is by
So it's
pausing
yeah,
what I'm doing.
so go ahead.
No, just by just like by drawing the stuff that I think sounds cool or how I would handle it, I guess. So
Conversely, you designed that pug in armor, and then in my original draft of the warlords were personalities that would run the warlord the pack, and so the what's now stubborn, the mood stubborn, where you take an extra hit, was originally that pug in armor,
well,
an
that's so
armored
funny
warlord.
because you originally when we were doing Root, we had talked about Pugnacious, which was a pug character, and then
Yep.
I think we decided kind of early on that mostly we wanted to keep the like non-foresty creatures to just be the cats, so they'd be like
Yeah.
the obvious outsider.
Yep.
But then when we were doing the Root RPG, and they were saying, "Oh, we want you need to draw some character portraits for the characters we've done." And then we ended up using those portraits for character classes. One of them was a pug, and I'd be like, "Oh, Pugnacious lives
Yeah,
on."
yeah.
And he's
So I think the pitch back then was to make the vagabonds a little bit more asymmetric from each other. And so Pugnacious was going to be like it was kind of my experiment with that, which was going to be a vagabond that had 3 dog warriors with him, and then he got points. So you could get points by controlling a clearing with those 3 warriors. So you wouldn't always move with them. They'd kind of hang out somewhere for him and kind of run his little clubhouse or his fort or whatever. And that's some of the genesis of the warlord. But Cole came up with the more consistent plan we have now. So.
Well, it made it just a little bit more modular, so we could just
absolutely
include a card.
We were experimenting, so
yeah.
Let's go down to list questions here. I'll go back to Twitter. Why no pandas? We're kind of sticking primarily to.
Kind of keeping them small.
Oh, geez, I gotta go. The kid just got hurt.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I'll field questions. Why no pandas? In my internal lore of Root, most of the animals are small, and like the size comparison is pretty gradual. So like a mouse is smaller than a cat, but not dramatically smaller than a cat. But once we get bigger than anything, like I think a wolf is probably the largest of the regular sized creatures. Then anything beyond that is sort of like ogre or giant sized. And pandas, like I don't know. We haven't really included much that isn't either a European or a North American animal. I think most of what we've tried to keep as my animal touchstones is like Wind in the Willows, Redwall, and a little bit of like Disney's Robin Hood in terms of like what I think a woodland animal is. I don't really think woodlands when I think of pandas, but almost every other animal we've included has been kind of a woodland creature. Hopefully that answers that. Let's see. Have you ever considered doing Root-themed T-shirts and merch sold on Leader Games Store? We need to talk about it more if we come down to it. The problem is that we have a warehouse that's already handling all of our games and that shipping, and then they have to worry when we do Kickstarters and stuff. Like every time somebody buys a different thing, we have to have a different way of shipping it so we don't send anyone the wrong thing. And then the problem becomes when you do a t-shirt, not only do you have to say, and they want a t-shirt, but you also have to say like they want this size of t-shirt. And so when you include apparel sizes, it complements the shipping exponentially. So maybe one day I'd like to do that. It'd be fun to have some like higher quality screen printed type stuff. Somebody asked if turtles exist in Root. I know that question is for Patrick. There are turtles in the Root RPG also. If you weren't here for any of the turtle chat in times past, you just kind of run into a problem with turtles of like, I can't clothe them consistently with the other animals in Root because the other animals in Root are all wearing clothes. And I can't put, like when you're dressing a turtle, I don't know if I put the clothes outside their shell or like get really wacky and put it inside their shell anatomy wise, and it was just no matter what I did, it looked like they were really out of place. So, but there is kind of a turtle in the Root RPG, but it has kind of like a big sweater over its shell, and it looks like a grandpa. And I didn't want the entire faction to just be like an army of grandpas, I guess. Let's see. I'm gonna keep going. Hopefully, Patrick's kid is okay. If anybody in the Leader Games office is watching this and wants to take his place, you can just hop in the Discord. Let's see. Does Root deliberately try to adhere to a fauna of a particular real-world region, or do you run with whatever feels believable to the existing setting? Like I said, woodland generally. I know we have both European and probably North American animals included, but if it feels like a woodland creature, that's kind of the criteria that I set. So things that are a little bit more jungle or even like desert aren't going to make the cut the same way a kind of a foresty animal does. Any
Hi,
chance?
Kyle.
Oh, hi.
I'm here.
Yay. Will you read
Brooke,
questions?
everybody.
So
Hi,
I can...
I'm Brooke. I work in marketing.
Yes.
I am here to try to facilitate the question asking process so that Kyle can do more of the thing you really came for, which is draw things.
The drawing.
Hello.
Patrick's back too.
Oh, Patrick's back. Oh my gosh, it's like a party now.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
The boy fell over in my daughter's room and probably got like a 3/4 inch cut on his forehead. Right
Oh
now.
no!
Yeah, he's getting cleaned up. We're debating if we're gonna take him to the.
Yeah, go get stitches if you need. Brooke can handle it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Brandy's gonna take him
Okay.
anyway, but. Well, sorry about that, everybody.
I'm sorry to hear that. Let's see. Someone said, "Can I get a high-resolution version of the Hireling box online? Want to use it as a desktop? Could you draw one skull this stream? Like an
I was
animal?"
kind of careful about the high def pictures because it's one of the few defenses we have against our stuff being stolen.
Yeah, and nobody can make it into an NFT, which is stupid. Sorry, did my true feelings about that come out?
No, that's gonna last like 5 seconds in court.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, but yeah. So we don't do a lot of high res releases of stuff. Just like even when we do the print and plays, all of the art is downsampled a little bit, just because we have to protect our IP. I mean, people can still print it and play it, obviously, but we want to keep it official in some capacity. I feel like I'm missing questions.
Yeah.
Here's one for both Kyle and Patrick. Do you have any advice for artists looking to get into board games? For Patrick, as a business owner and a game designer, what's your process and criteria for what you're looking for an artist? And for Kyle, do you have any advice for developing an art style which is adaptable to many different settings and products while also being recognizable?
Whoa! That's a lot of questions. That's a lot of questions.
That's the seminar that we'll be talking about for the remainder of the stream.
Yeah, no, that's some of those things I am not the best person to ask about, because like, how do you get into board games? Well, you get Patrick Leader to hire you after I die. Because there's I don't really know anybody who works in board games who has the kind of setup that I have, where I get to be kind of like the in-studio person who gets to talk about games while they're being made. Most board game art happens after all of the other work is done. And honestly, that's for a freelance job, that's ideal, because you don't want to be doing a lot of work on something that isn't finished and have them come back and be like, the game doesn't have cards anymore. And it's like, oh, well, I've already put 400 hours into drawing the cards or something. But the speed and the kind of the development process at Leader Games works well with what we're doing, and hopefully more people adopt that kind of in-house thing. But that's, yeah, so I don't know how to answer that question. As far as developing a style is just whatever I don't think anyone should worry about getting a style, because a style is just what happens when you're being as prolific as possible. You're going to settle into things that you find that I mean, it's just kind of this Venn diagram of like things that you know how to do and things that you like and don't change. So it's like there's I can think of like the exact picture of a gorilla from a Calvin and Hobbes comic, the way that Bill Watterson drew the eyebrows on the gorilla, and it's like that's how I draw gorilla eyebrows from now on, because I like the way it looked. It's very effective, and that's just how I drew it. And like that kind of shorthand for what big bulky eyebrow like flesh looks like found its way into all of the goblins for Vast. That's why all their eyebrow like bumps, ridges look like that, is because of a Bill Watterson gorilla. And it was probably something that he didn't even really think about while he was doing it, but like that has found its way into my style, not because I thought, ooh, that's stylish, but because it's effective and I can do it, and it just sort of, it stuck. I think the same goes for everything, how different people draw hands or whatever. I mean, if you want to be versatile, then you just have to draw a lot of different things. It's sort of like the answer of saying, how do you win the game? It's like, well, scoring more points than the other team. That doesn't really give you the exact how to, but it's kind of a, you get more prolific by drawing more, and you get work in board games by drawing things for board games. I got into this business, I guess you could say, by doing D&D character illustrations, and that led into doing some spot illustrations for a role-playing game, and that led to my art being prevalent enough online that someone who was making a board game, David Somerville, when he was making Vast, before he sold it to Patrick, that my art came along with like as a placeholder on a card, and he said, give this guy a call if you're interested, and that turned into this. So a lot of luck and just being prolific, I think, is important. Did I miss some aspect of the question, Brooke, that I can?
No, it sounds pretty great.
Okay.
All right, next one could probably be a double, although, Patrick, do you want to talk about looking for artists? Because we don't have to, so I know it could be difficult. We have Kyle.
The answer is, don't you dare look for another artist. You have me, and that's it. I know Patrick's talked to me before about one of the reasons that he wanted to hire me is because the art is evocative, and that it didn't look like a lot of the other stuff that was out there in the board game scene already. I think there's kind of such a thing as, there's a lot of polish on some really high fantasy type stuff, but it all starts to look samey. So my advice there would be, if you want to be an artist that stands out, then don't worry about aping someone's style as much as like taking aspects about it that you like and incorporating it into what you do. Like, you don't want to be the cheap version of anybody else. Even if you're talking about like Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, there's a bunch of people who can draw like him, but even the ones that, like Duncan Fredigo, who does a lot of the Hellboy comics now, the illustration, like, you can tell it's him. It's different than Mike's work. And it's his own take on it. He didn't just say, I'm going to copy exactly what Mike Mignola does exactly. I'm going to do my own thing. And I think that's important. But yeah. Next question.
Kyle, do you prefer drawing animals or humans?
I don't know. It kind of depends. I like drawing animals. My kids ask me to draw animals all the time. That's one of the reasons that, when we were first starting to talk about Path, that eventually, we are using the world that we made for Path to make Root. The reason I made them animals is because my kids were asking me to draw animals all the time anyway. I have lots of Photoshop files. It'll be like, a kind of painterly looking ogre or something for some project, but then there's like hidden layers, and the layers are all like tiny kittens on top of the ogre. Because my kids would jump into whatever I was doing and say like, draw a cat. And so I would do it really quick. But but I like drawing people too. I drew a lot of people for Oath, but I mean I did make sure to include pets and things in Oath. I think it's not so much a preference as much as just like different tools for different results. You know, if you want something to look a certain way, then use your certain tools. But so no preference there. That's kind of a non-answer. It's like when people ask me what my favorite color is. I'm like, I need more context. What's my favorite boat color? What's my favorite board game piece color? I mean, it's just like depending on the context, I think it can change completely. But that's not a satisfying answer for a lot of people.
You talked a little bit about your gorilla eyebrows earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever experiment with completely different styles? And or also, who have you studied that really influenced you?
Every now and then, just as an exercise, I will try and draw something really similar to someone else's art. So like, oh, now I can't remember her name. I'm gonna look it up real quick so I don't look like a fool. So Ryoko Kui, I don't know if I'm saying that right. She is the creator and illustrator for the manga series Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi, and I love her character design so much. But it's also way different than anything I'm doing. But if, sometimes I will just draw like something from another artist like her, just to kind of see how it feels, or what things she's doing formally, with the form that make it look a certain way, like how she's drawing her mouths or ears or things on her characters. But that's just for me, that's just a practice thing. I don't like post those online or try and sell them or anything. That's just all of that kind of like tracing or just like trying to copy things one for one. That's just an exercise. That's just for me. So at the end of it, I can be like, okay, so, and then maybe I take something from that and I incorporate it into something I'm doing from now on. These ears, like these markings inside the ears, are probably something I got from David Peterson's mouse guard books, because that's what he does inside of the ears of his mouse characters. And I love those books, but I've like done fan art of his stuff before, but I wouldn't try and ape it exactly and make it for a project like Root. Like, it would still need to be my stuff. I wouldn't want it to look like a fan art project. So sometimes I'll or Richard Scarry, for example, or sometimes I'll try and do, because most of what I do is ink and paper and then coloring digitally. If I see some illustrations that are, painted or colored pencil or other things, I'll try out stuff just so I can familiarize myself better with other techniques too. You always get kind of that question about what pens do you use and stuff. And I think it's kind of sometimes it can be an annoying question, because you want to tell people like, oh, well, pens don't make that much of a difference. It's, it's your skill. But I'm a pretty firm believer that, tools do make a difference. You do use, some pens different than others. I have, just for, an example, most of what I'm drawing Root stuff in is just these Prismacolor markers. And then I have a brush pen that I'm doing a lot of the inking with. But I also have a thicker brush pen that I use if I need to use, if I need to paint things in bigger areas. If I need, I have lots of different, I have this one that I have to keep on its side, because if I try and do it upright, then the nib gets clogged. And so, I'm not coloring, or I'm not inking any of Root with this, because then it wouldn't look like the rest of Root. So this would be, I try to keep my tools consistent for the project because they influence, the overall feeling and style. And the best way to change your style or to make something look different for a project is just to change what tools you're using. If I were to, like the Hirelings box, looks a little bit different than all the other Root stuff because that's all mechanical pencil. And like watercolor washes, so it's going to end up looking different than the other Root things. But now I forgot the question. Did that did that answer the question?
Can I go back to the question for me? I'm back now.
Yes.
All right. Sebastian left for the urgent care, so I will not be interrupted for a while. Poor buddy though. What is this art going to be, Kyle?
What is this art going to be?
Yeah.
Like 4?
Yeah. What are you working on?
Nothing. Just drawing.
Oh, okay. I thought you were doing a mood card when we started.
No, see, and this is kind of what I was just talking about. Is that like this rat could be like for a mood card, but it's actually the wrong size. Like it's smaller because of the way the phone is, and like the other rat characters that I'm drawing are like this big, and so the line weight on the cards would be inconsistent. That's something that might totally be in my head, is something that people care about, but it's something that I care about. Is just making sure all the line weights are consistent for what size things needs to be. That's why when I see, when people do fan factions and they take, or like fan art maps, and they take some of the Root art and they just shrink it down small, it's just like, oh, that doesn't look right to me, because they're not factoring in the line weight stuff. But
you're the only one that sees it. I mean, it does feel a little off to me sometimes, and I probably don't have words for why, and that might be why. Well,
just to show you, this is an 01 pen. So if I were to continue drawing this with an 03 pen, it's not like, it's not the end of the world. But if a different tool just affects how it looks, just enough that I start to draw differently with it. And if I were to take a pen that was, let's see, I think I have an 005 here. If I have an 005 pen, which is what I think a lot of the vast stuff I did with the 005 pen, it's just a little bit thinner and changes how I draw with it too. So I don't know, things that matter to me, but not not always to others. Most of Oath is illustrated with 03 pens because I had to draw a lot of things and they were on teeny cards. So I chose kind of a faster, bigger tool for it. Anyway.
So the Codex 14 is stealing my line. The real victory points are the friends we made along the way. Don't I say that quite a bit, Kyle?
Yes, you do.
Whatever is the friends we made along the way.
And I always chirp in with something like, it was inside us all along.
So what I was going to say about marketing yourself as an artist to someone in my position, I think was what the question originally was about, if I remember correctly, is that, essentially you're marketing yourself and you get hired for the job. So how we met Kyle, it's just kind of circumstance, right? Like it was, David was working on, he was using some Dungeon World art in his vast prototype, which we took out as very quickly if the people from Dungeon World are watching. And it was Kyle's art. And at the time I'd asked David who he wanted to work with, and we made a list of artists and we contacted them. And we picked Kyle to work with. And I mean, I think, what keeps him around, and I've, like my brother maybe, or one of the other people I know that works in Hollywood says, like, if there's a character on a show and they pop up later, it's because they were easy to work with. So, like, sometimes there's characters in, like, the second season of a show that are just going to be there for the second season, and then they're there in 4 and 5. They don't get killed off or whatever. and it's just because that person's really easy to work with and fun to work with for the other cast. And so like they just bring them back, even though the purpose of their character is gone. And so sometimes you see characters kind of awkward, like, why are they still here? But it's because the person is easy to work with, and vice versa. Sometimes you think like, God, like, wasn't that guy supposed to be the villain all the way through this, and then they're gone, and it's like, well, it's because they're a pain in the butt to work with. So, so that's, I mean, and it's not just being friendly or whatever. It's just being like agreeable to suggestions, and working with the people around you is really important, and communication is quite important. So and Kyle, like when I met him, was very forthright about what his expectations were. His contract had like, I'll do this many redraws, built into the contract, and communicating with him was really easy, and that made it a lot of fun. And of course his style's amazing. So so that's so just develop an impeccable style and be easy to work with. It's that easy.
Well, there's a Neil Gaiman like commencement address where he talks to kids from some kind of liberal arts school, and the advice that he gives them is that there's 3 things that make you like a good artist to work with, and they are that your work is always on time, that you're a pleasure to work with, and that your work is really well done. And then he kind of ends the talk by saying, and you only need 2. That if you're a pleasure to work with, and your work is really well done, then it doesn't matter if you're late, and you can combine those in any other combination. And I definitely know other people who are really on time and really beautiful art who I would not like to work with because of their general attitude and things, but I know that's why they're successful and employed is because of they're maintaining those 2 traits.
Sure.
Anyway,
I cannot more strongly recommend that. Like it's just so easy. I'd also like put forward that I've worked with probably, I don't know, like for more than 40 hours I've worked with, or a month I've worked with maybe 6 illustrators in my career, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to just provide sketches before you commit to doing something, which is just part of communication. It was always so frustrating when you'd get finals of something, and they'd be like, well, this isn't what we needed or asked for or wanted or anything. So
yeah, we've almost evolved past that in our working relationship.
Yeah,
I'll just send you
not up front. Yeah,
like we,
that's
I can mostly tell what you're thinking about some stuff, or do the whole like, that's not what you want, this is what you want kind of thing. Well,
or I just don't fight you when.
Right, or it's something that isn't great or doesn't work, and then we just shelve it and I do a new one because like I'm comfortable, enough to say like, oh, well, no effort is wasted, But yep.
I like working with Kyle, in case you can't tell.
Yeah,
I like all my coworkers.
All right,
I'm off the hook.
More questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't been scanning. Let's go. See, I don't know what I missed, so I'll have to.
Oh, that's okay.
When do we get to see Kyle's artwork in the form of a fort expansion in retail? That'll be coming up this summer.
This summer.
Yep. It is currently being printed, I think. I feel really lazy for not knowing what's in production, what's on the boat, but it's become a complicated problem, and my brain is kind of fried lately from lack of sleep because I have a teething child.
That's what we pay Marshall for.
We pay Marshall to worry about that. There's things on a boat, there's things in a factory. That's what I need.
Yeah, he knows where things are, and then we just ask him. That's why I think the beauty of the studio thing is like, once we're doing more than one board game at a time, I really appreciate being able to say, like, when someone says, hey, what's this, blah, 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 and I'm like, I'll ask the person who knows that thing. I don't have to know every single thing because I have access to the people who do. But.
Do you have a favorite faction or species?
To play or to draw?
And let's follow that up immediately with, and if you could add your own faction, what would you add?
So to play, I usually play birds when I'm teaching Root because I am not good at them. And I think generally as a rule when I play board games with people, I don't like to introduce them to a game and crush them at the game right away. I feel like that has better holding power if they have a good experience and do well. So I usually choose the birds, but not because I'm like really good at the birds. It's the opposite. I'm not very good at being the birds. Um, as far as the ones I like to draw, um, I like drawing Woodland Alliance because I like drawing lots of interaction on the cards, or I like creating like little vignettes. So like when you look at card art, it's sort of like a scene you're getting like a little picture of. And because the Woodland Alliance is made up of the denizens of the forest, I think that's it's fun to draw, two mice having tea in a forest, or like a bird jumping out at a mouse and a rabbit, or foxes going to visit their friends and things. I like all that. But
When I played the RPG, we went and visited somebody at their house, at like a fox or a mouse at their house, and I thought that was very charming.
Yeah, when we played the RPG, I chose to be a mouse, and so I do like drawing the mice characters. So I'll draw one right now.
Is there any? Oh yeah. So what faction would you add?
Oh,
Dogs.
I have kind of for fun pitched like an agricultural faction.
Yes.
That might one day be a hireling at most. Like it's not. I don't do the game design for Root. It's too hard for me. And I admire everybody who's doing any kind of fan faction-y stuff for it, because like I love playing Root. I can't get my head around doing the actual design stuff. So, but like a hireling faction or something that's made of like pigs and chickens, or kind of another outsider group that doesn't exactly fit in a woodland. And I've done some kind of doodles of like a rooster in a Root style, and ducks or chickens. So I think that would be fun. But honestly, I love all the stuff we're including already. So I'm excited to draw more badgers, rats, things like that. So I love Mr. Badger from Wind in the Willows. He's probably my favorite character in that, so it's been cool to include some more badgers.
I'm just typing a little note here to Ted, our accountant. No, I'm back. Patrick is delegated. No, I'm very worried about. It's also like because Lost Braid. I'm like in like design mode right now, so like it's really hard for me to like switch gears, and it almost painful. So I've been working on other stuff, and I have to kind of compartmentalize my thinking. Otherwise, I'm back and worrying about Root again, or I'm back and worrying about production logistics again.
Yeah. I kind of get into focus mode about stuff, but also I need projects to bounce around on sometimes too. If I've been drawing 1,000, fort things, it's nice to be able to pivot to another thing just for the sake of keeping things fresh.
Turtle versus a hare expansion. That's kind of funny.
We almost have that if you play one of the slow burn factions versus the Woodland Alliance. They're kind of the tortoises in that. It's like, oh, they won't catch up, and then they win.
And then they do it. What is the cat concerned about?
I don't know.
Will there be a toad or bat faction?
Frogs have always been something that I've incorporated in. Like when we did the original doodles for Path, there was a frog, because originally that concept was that every different thing. Well, that was for your dexterity game, actually. Was that Path at one point?
So Path, yeah. So Path had two. Path was derived from my earlier thing I was working on, where David was mentoring me in asymmetric design, and there was two approaches to Path. One was we would make a game where everybody had very simple movement, which is now Grimthorn, or simple design, and then your victory condition would rely on which faction you were. And so it was still sudden death like Vast. So, and I think, so in that design, I think the frogs were like the kind of the pilgrim character
they
that was
were-
just trying to cross the
Yeah,
map.
so but all of them had a different like species. So like that
Yep.
there were cats, and there were birds, there was frogs, and there was a spider, and there was a beetle, and like so they all had their own, like they were all very different. And some of those things kept on, and some of those things fell apart. So like there's no bugs in Root, um, but yeah, I don't think it would be totally unusual to have frogs or bats. I know those have been some of the fun ones in the Root RPG that people have liked to see. There's definitely more bat art in the RPG if you're interested in those. But
Since then, Path has moved to it's moved away. Well,
Yeah.
it's the other branch. The
It's
branch I'm currently working on is one where everyone's starts out kind of equal, and then based on the relationships you form during the game, your the way you score points adjusts. So
Mhm.
if you buddy up with the cats, then you get points for completing. You get more points for completing bounties. If you buddy up with the badgers, then you get more points for bringing relics back.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I think the print and plays have one more window that we're gonna update them. That's probably again compartmentalizing. I should know this, but I just don't know it. Now that I'm done with my contribution to the rats and badgers, I'm kind of out of the design process.
Yep.
That's I mean it's hard to keep up with Cole, frankly. So it's better just to let him cruise on that.
Yep. Any other art questions?
Yeah. Ask our questions. Does the ink not smear as you rest your hand on the page?
Nope. It's a marker, essentially. The kind of paper I use, and this is another tools thing, the kind of paper I use soaks up the ink really well. If I was doing ink on Bristol or something, where it's not very absorbent, then I would run into some of that kind of smearing problem. And like this is sort of like a dark area right here is dark enough that I probably won't put my hand on it, but it dries pretty quick. But the other pen that I'm using is basically a marker, and it dries almost immediately. So finding the right combination of pens and inks. I did the hourly comic thing this year, and I tried using these same tools that I always use, just in a different kind of sketchbook. And the bleed was so bad that it was it was driving me crazy, and it was like altering the color of the markers I was using. Like I was using a blue marker, but it would like every time I went over any of the ink that hadn't dried because the paper was so non-absorbent, it would just turn it gray. So it looked like I was using a gray marker. So I quickly switched to a different kind of paper.
What have you studied in the past that's had the biggest impact on your art?
What have I studied?
Yeah.
You
studied art.
I did. I have a BFA in visual communication. So my my focus in school was graphic design and illustration. And even though I don't really do any graphic design at Leader Games, I did before Leader Games, and I'm really grateful for the visual communication aspect of that education, because I think I learned a lot about like visual hierarchy, and like what captivates people, what keeps people looking at an image, like so they can kind of get lost in it, or like how to convey messages really clearly, because like art is one thing unto itself, and then illustration is like basically just problem solving. Like you have a problem and like I need to communicate something, and so the problem solving is, how do I do that clearly in, within these parameters. And so like graphic design school is why when I drew the box art for Root, that sort of has become the style for Root, I did white outlines along the highlight regions of all of those characters, is because I needed them to stand out more than the background. So I dropped down the darkness of all the outlines in the background stuff, so you can see it better, and sort of your eye knows where to look first. So I attribute a lot of
story
that
about the
stuff.
fast cover when
Yes.
talking about where to look first.
Yes. Mhm.
Yes, go ahead, finish it. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Tell the vast story.
So when we first saw the cover for Vast, first of all, I like started weeping. But so like there was a discussion about the arrangement of the characters for Vast the Crystal Caverns, and Kyle said, no. Look, people, it's correct because it's like you look for the familiar thing on the cover, and you're gonna see the knight in the lower left corner because that's the easiest, like that's the first place your eyes can sweep to. And then you're gonna look for like the imposing thing in the cover, and then your eyes can sweep to the dragon. And then you start to realize something weird's going on, and your eye will sweep to the goblins because they're a big pack of things that you have to like. You can't identify at once, but as you look at the pack, you'll start to break them down into what they are and figure out that they're goblins. And then you're going to realize that there's detail in the background, and you're going to look at the cave. And I felt chills when he said that in an email because I was like, that was exactly how I first experienced that cover when I saw it. Exactly how I experienced that cover. So that the digital media is paid off.
That's like, I mean, it's just so, I had to take art history classes and things. You sometimes think, am I ever going to use this? But it's like understanding art history and graphic design history and stuff is, I think, legitimately important. Like, I don't know. We can argue the merits of a college education in art in another way, maybe. But like, as far as what I learned, I'm very grateful for, those things that I carry with me and honestly think about almost every day when I'm trying to draw something or do something. Yeah.
All right, sorry, I'm trying to keep track of everything here.
Oh, you're good. I'm talking too long for what the questions are. I'm sure.
I'm talking to the audience, not you. Why are you saying that? Oh, it turns out art is hard. I mean, it's all hard. Design's hard. Art question for Kyle. What has been your favorite project to work on at Leader?
My favorite project to work on at Leader? I don't know. I kind of like everything. Because if I don't like it, I don't really work on it. I've had my hands in every project that we've done except for maybe Bunkers and Badasses.
Yeah.
But that's because they already had art for it, So I wasn't involved.
They already knew how it was going to look.
Yeah. So I wasn't involved in that one. No, I've liked everything. Anybody who knows me knows I'm drawing stuff with swords in my sketchbook all the time. So it's a good fit if I can, keep that going, and let's fit a lot of our properties. I really enjoyed kind of the indulgent nature of doing Root is just doing exactly what I would have wanted to do as a fifth grader. Telling fifth grade Kyle, you're just going to draw animals with weapons for your job. Like that on a pure, just like, yeah, I like doing that a lot. It's a lot of fun to do that. That's really enjoyable. But I also really liked when we were working on Oath. I like it in hindsight, but in the moment, I was really struggling to like, we got to make this, I have 200 some odd cards to draw. And I want it to look good, but like I can't spend hours and hours on every single card because it's just not going to make sense to do that. And plus, they're little cards, so it was a big problem-solving experience, and I liked that. Like I like trying to figure out something that would work for our goal, and so that's a different kind of enjoyment out of that. Not as indulgent, but more like an accomplishment. I come away from looking at that giant card list from Oath and think, man, I hardly even remember drawing some of these because I was just like, in the zone, in the flow, just making as many as I could to try and fit the different themes. And sometimes for a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'm just seeing an art list, and the art list will say like, this is the name of the card, and this is kind of what it does. And then I have to come up with the art for that, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot. I like that part of the process. So, All is my answer.
Do you have any support staff or assistants to do coloring cleanup, Kyle?
No. No.
His boss is too cheap.
Well, I'm also like, I'm stingy about that. I want to do it.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person that like, just kind of in another avenue, but I love playing D&D. I love playing tabletop role-playing games. And even if I really like the people who are doing it, I cannot listen to podcasts or live plays of people who are doing or playing D&D because I just want to do it so bad. I'll be listening to someone going, and I just think, oh, I want to DM. Like, I want to play D&D. I don't want to listen to people do it. And I think it would be the same thing for outsourcing coloring or flatting or cleaning up or whatever. It's just like, one, there's a time factor, but two, just like I would see somebody do it and I'd be like, oh, but I want to do it. I don't know. I like being in control of that part of the process. But so no, we don't have anybody else that does that. I do all of it. I will say there are some things like making graphics and things at work that our excellent graphic designers sort of take the assets that I've created and make it into something workable. Like I'm not like formatting every image for a Board Game Geek advertisement or anything. Like I'm not doing that. But as far as just like creating the assets, I'm doing all the. There's no cleanup or coloring or anything that isn't being done by me. So.
Yeah, let's play D&D on stream. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be fun.
Except martial attack everything.
Yeah. Well, on the other thing about D&D is that like I haven't played it in person since last year, and
Yeah.
I miss it in person. Like it just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I always joke around with my wife about spaghetti squash, and just that I don't like it, and my big critique of spaghetti squash is like they shouldn't have called it that. Because its biggest downfall is that the comparison is right there, and every bite of spaghetti squash, I just think not as good as spaghetti. And just regular spaghetti would be better than this. And now I can't even remember what we were talking about. But if you just like you don't want to build the comparison into the
you're I think what you're saying is D&D online is not the same as D&D live.
Yes,
Much the same way that spaghetti squash is not living up to the expectation.
Yeah, I'll be sitting there and it's like the podcast where it's like this isn't. I want to be doing the actual thing, not this. But and that's like I really admire our company for trying to cater to the needs of people who like to solo game. I don't really do much of that either because like I play board games for a different reason. I want to hang out with people. So yeah.
But it's I don't know. Did you study animal anatomy studies before drawing for roots?
No, clearly not. Like, obviously not. Look at a picture of a mouse and then look at this mouse. Like, it looks like a cartoon mouse. It looks like an allusion to cartoon mice. Like, it looks more like Mickey Mouse than it does an actual mouse. But that's okay. It's shorthand for mouse. I do look at some pictures of animals if I'm like when we did the otters and the one vagabond, it's a beaver, and even drawing the porcupines recently for the hirelings. I do look at pictures of animals to be like, what is the porcupine-ness? What makes something look like a porcupine that makes it not look like an otter or a beaver? Because like they do look pretty similar in a lot of ways, and like even just like the faces of a mouse and a rabbit don't look that different in how they draw them. So you just kind of have to latch onto the things that make them look different, like their ears, or the way their snout is shaped, or how big their eyes are, and things like that. So I also, when I did the first Root board game, I wasn't that into bird watching, but since a little bit more than a year ago, I've gotten really into backyard birding, watching birds. And so now when I draw birds, I actually care about what they look like. But in the past, it was just like bird. This is what a bird looks like.
That's what a bird in the universe would say.
Yeah.
I think taking you to XOXO was more life-changing for you than it was for me. That's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, because of that book. Yep.
We went to a seminar about not commercializing every moment of your life, and I have not followed that advice, and Kyle has.
It's a good book. It's called How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, and I highly recommend it. It's good.
It was an amazing seminar because she was caught in the conflict of how do I sell this book without commercializing
advertising her own book about not having to be productive all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah. To give you the short version of that and why it's been so life-changing for me is one of the metaphors she kind of talked about either on the seminar or online is sort of like when you go to a bar, all the music is loud and everyone hates it. It just makes people uncomfortable, and everyone, if they could turn down the music at the bar. But the bar will never turn down the music because people who are a little bit agitated buy more food and drinks. And once you understand that, like all of social media, like all of our online stuff, it's like, yeah, you're being kept unhappy on purpose because you are more productive that way. But life isn't just about being a product for another person. Anyway, we don't need to get metaphysical in here, but I really like the book.
That's a good lesson, though.
For that reason, yeah.
XOXO is a little art
it's
festival
it's the most hippy-dippy thing I've ever been to, and it was in Portland.
And it was amazing.
It was the most hippy-dippy thing happening in Portland. And it says a lot, but it was amazing. Yeah. Anyway.
Cool. Well, we got like 4 minutes. If I missed your question, quick repost it. Let's see what I can get. We'll do the lightning round.
Just looking real quick. Someone said, "Do I have a favorite Disney animation?" Oh, my favorites when I was a kid were Sword in the Stone and Robin Hood, the Disney ones. I really love Bill Pete style. They call it like Xerox animation, where you can still see like pencil lines and stuff like 101 Dalmatians and Jungle Book, stuff like that, where you can still see a lot of like the work that went into it. We were just talking about this the other day, Patrick, where it's like that's the inherent charm of the medium. That's like when you can see mistakes and you can see ink bleed, paper texture, pencil marks. Like I like seeing the human hand and things, and I love the message of the Sword in the Stone, and I like Robin Hood and all those things are fun. When I was like a little kid, I would hide underneath the table during the Madam Mim parts of Sword in the Stone. But now my kids watching it doesn't even faze them. Children today are they're not scared by Madam Mim apparently. But
do you like Don Bluth?
I do like Don Bluth. Yeah, I grew up with a lot of Don Bluth stuff because I mean, not only did I see his stuff on like old movies, but also I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so is Don Bluth, and so he did a lot of church productions too. So things that are not in the mainstream that are still Don Bluth animated, like Living Scriptures type stuff. So I do like Don Bluth. We joke around that like some meme or some comic where Don Bluth did where like people in his animation studio were like, "Are we sure we want like 6 minutes of a character just drowning or eating?" And Don Bluth is like, "Shut up and work," because it's like all of his movies are just like really like he does a lot with mouth movement and shapes, and he exaggerates it more than any other like well-known animator that I can think of. And I don't know, so I do like Don Bluth. I love Rats of Nim. I loved that book before I even watched the movie. Still like the movie. I think it's a classic and it holds up. I do like it when Dom DeLuise is in a movie, and I think he's in every single one of Don Bluth's movies in some capacity.
I was reminded of him because of Dragon's Lair, right? Because he worked on he worked on the 3 dragons or the 2.5.
Yep. So he did that, and then he did the Space Ace, or whatever the follow-up one. He did that too. So very, very weird, very cool. I don't know. I like those. And let's see. Any other I'm missing?
How'd the deer in the hirelings box get up the tree, Kyle?
He's not in a tree.
He's that tall.
No, it's just, and he's like, I think you're all picturing the bottom of the box as like the floor, but it's clearly like a drone view top down, like an isometric drawing where you're looking down at 45 degrees on a plane. So the bear isn't short, the deer isn't in a tree, they're just behind the tree. Like, I don't know. It's like, I guess that's the risk of drawing something a little bit different, is that people are like, what is happening here? And I don't know. I laughed. I sent Patrick a picture of the rabbit in the hirelings box that's also slightly obscured by the tree. It's just like, so is he touching the ground? Is he in a tree? Is his entire body coming down behind? Like, he's just behind a tree slightly. The real answer is because I drew the deer last to go on the box because we weren't sure where the title was going to go on the box. So, anyway.
All right. Well, very cool. Thank you, Kyle. It's 3:00.
It's 2:00.
Probably. So, dang it. It's the top of the hour.
Yeah,
how's that?
it's 3:00 in work time.
And it's back. Yeah. So thanks for coming by. Follow Kyle on Twitter, D20 plus modifier. I think he's on other things too, right?
I am, but I don't post a ton on Facebook, and I don't know. You can follow my Pinterest, but I don't post anything there either. I'm mostly just on Twitter if you want to see anything. And if we missed any questions that you want to follow up with or whatever, you can hit me up on Twitter, and I'll try and get to those. And yeah.
I'm assuming the audience here is back to Kickstarter. So
I hope so. Yeah.
That's covered.
If you're here for some other reason and you haven't backed the Marauders Kickstarter, you should definitely get in on that. I'm super excited for the kind of like play space that it's let me explore. I love the idea of the hirelings. We can put in a couple little weird things that wouldn't normally fit en route. And I love the more two-player emphasis stuff on the Badgers and the Rats. But I also love the idea of like playing with a lot of people and just having a super full map with, if you're going to play cats, rats, badgers, moles, and just like make it as broken as possible with just way too many guys. I just think that also sounds awesome. So definitely check it out. Yeah, we have more streams coming up. I think we have one. Thursday is the video one, right?
No, that's Friday. So
That's
Thursday is going to be the matchup between Cole and I.
Yes.
As we do two militant factions against each other, which I think we have to pick still.
Yep.
I was going to put up a poll, but I didn't know what Cole would think of that poll. And then we're playing with the hirelings, the full hirelings, to do that. And then Friday we'll be doing we'll be watching the movies, and that's how that's going to go. And then the project's ending next Tuesday.
Somebody just asked if I'll be coloring. No, I'm done. I think I've done coloring on the computer and then drawing in real life on these streams before, and it seems like more people like watching me draw than just color. So.
Oh, yeah, of course, it's going to be Badgers versus Rats. Who's playing what? I think was actually is the real question. So.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.